What's going on, guys? It's your boy. How you doing? You doing good? I'm doing good as well. You know why? Because we're going to take a look at another free VST drum plugin that I recently downloaded, which is none other than Cakewalk by BandLab. So essentially with today's video, we'll play it right out the box, give you my initial impressions, and then we'll tamper with the settings, try to make it sound as good as possible, and then I'll give you my final judgment based on whether or not I recommend this to anyone with musical aspirations. So, if you want to see all that and more, be sure to stick around! Alright guys, so for this particular segment, I got myself the Logitech Brio, that's the webcam that I got over here, and we got the blue ball, or blue ball, I meant to say the snowball, blue snowball, whatever the heck you want to call this thing, the microphone. That's how we're going to be recording from here. And as far as the DAW of choice, I have chosen Reaper. So Reaper, it only costs like 60 US bucks. And as you can see here, just a very streamlined layout, very easy to use. It's got all the features I need. It's only 60 USD, so for anybody that's interested in looking for a new DAW, otherwise known as a digital audio workstation, link in the description box down below. So you guys might be wondering how I got the drums in my DAW. And it's actually pretty simple. So most DAWs should allow you to do this, but essentially with Reaper, you go to track, and then you go to insert virtual instrument on new track. And then this screen will show up right here. You scroll through your instruments. Sometimes you might have to go under one of these VST tabs as well. But essentially you just look for your respective instrument, which in this case is the Cakewalk drums. So that would be this one right here. Then you click add, and it'll ask you if you want to build separate channels for routing. You can click yes or no. I'll usually just click no initially, that way I can do my own customizing as far as the routing channels. But that's essentially all you gotta do. Once you do that, your plugin will show in this little screen right over here. And as you can see, it actually shows the full kit. And it's got some other options too that we'll go over real quick. But as you can see for the drum set, we got the bass drum, we got the snare, the different toms, and then we got the hi-hat, crash, the ride cymbal, and if we go down here as well, you can change the tuning of each individual component. You can also change the panning, you can increase the volume, lower the volume, keep it the same. You can also change the compression, the reverb, the overall master volume. So this volume right here, this is your master volume. If you want to just change the individual components, you would change the volumes down here. Like if you wanted your snare drum to be a little bit louder, or you wanted your crash cymbals to be a little quieter, then you would change them down here. But for the overall drum set, your main settings are going to be right over here. One thing that I find pretty neat about this plugin is you can actually play along while the plugin is sending the algorithm to play. So if we go to the left-hand corner right over here, you drop any one of these down. Let's drop this one down. I like this one a lot. It's called Broccoli Breath. And then there's another one called Drinking Bleach. Get a Job. House on Fire. I don't know where they come up with these names, but if you just click on any one of them, the algorithm will just start playing, and then, you know, you can use it for recording purposes, or you can play along to it, which is pretty neat. So let's give it a shot. So that's pretty cool, huh? So while that's playing, you can actually play along to it as well. So if I want to add like another snare beat or add some toms to it, I can do that while the algorithm is playing. And that could be with click and mouse, it can be with the keyboard, or really just any MIDI instrument. And you know, MIDI instrument, that's just anything that will send a sound for it to come out. So when I play my drums, for example, the drums themselves don't make the sound, but they send the signal to, you know, for the sound to come out. That's how it works. So I can use my drums, I can use a mouse, keyboard, anything like that would work while you're letting this play along, so you can play along to it. So we'll try it out real quick. I don't know, I think that's kind of cool. What do you guys think? So let me know in the comment section down below. So what I'm going to do now is just leave all the different settings as they are. So the 11% compression, 19% reverb, 70% master volume, And I think it's like 70% volume across the board with each individual component. I didn't mess with the tuning or the panning. This is just how it came straight out the box. So what I'll do is I'll use my drum set right behind me, and we'll just play a little bit, see how everything sounds in my headphones, and I'll give you guys my first impressions. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into it. So when it comes to my first impressions of this drum plugin, I'll start with the positives, and for the positives, I didn't have any latency issues. So in other words, whenever I would hit one of those pads, there wasn't any delay with the sound, so as soon as I hit the pad, immediately triggers the sound. No issues with that whatsoever. And each of the different triggers match the corresponding sound that I intended to make. So for example, if I hit the snare pad, I want it to have snare sounds. The cymbal pads, cymbal sounds, toms, yada yada yada. Cue the Seinfeld meme.
I'm on 3rd Avenue, minding my own business, and yada yada yada. I get a free massage and a facial.
That's what she said!
I know for most plugins, that's not usually an issue, but I still keep it in mind nonetheless. When it comes to the actual sounds of the drum kit, I think some of them actually sound pretty good. Like the toms, for example, they have like a nice full sound to them, which is pretty nice. And the cymbals, they sound realistic. They got that nice reverby ring to them after you hit them. So that's pretty neat. Now all that being said, I do have mixed opinions of how this kit sounds right out of the box, not adjusting any of the settings or anything like that. The first one is the bass drum. So it kind of sounds like I'm popping popcorn in a microwave in a different room, rather than having that signature thud that I would associate with a bass drum. So it kind of throws it off a bit because the toms, you know, they got like a nice full, powerful sound to them. So to have like a popcorn bass drum sort of throws it off a little bit for me. My other nitpick is the crash cymbal that's on this kit. So in the plugin, in the DAW, it only shows one, but there is technically two of them. And I have two crash cymbal triggers with my drum set, so I'm getting both sounds. One of them sounds perfectly fine, but the other one, it sounds like it's ringing directly in my ear. It sounds really close to the kit. It overpowers everything else. It's way too loud. But that being said, I can just ignore it. I can just not hit it. I'll just stick to one of them, and that's perfectly fine. It's nothing I can't do without. So that's a segue into another nitpick that I have with this drum kit, and it's regarding its dynamic range. And for anyone that's unfamiliar, dynamic range is ultimately accounting for the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to your overall music. You can also just narrow it down to each individual component of the music, whether it be the vocals, the drums, the guitar, or just the individual components of the drum set, anything like that. All that is accounted in the soundscape of your dynamic range with your music. And even though the volumes are the same across the board with every single component of this drum set, it still sounds way off. Like, one of the crash cymbals, as I mentioned earlier, is significantly louder than the other, and the bass drum and the snare, they both kind of get drowned in the mix, which is weird because they typically cut right through the mix, especially the snare drum, but they actually get kind of buried with the way that this kit is mixed because the toms, the hi-hat, all that stuff overpowers it, so I'll definitely have to adjust the volume levels a bit. So probably the most polarizing aspect of this drum kit for me, aside from its dynamic range right out the box, is the snare sound, so the sound of the snare drum. I don't know what it is, but I like the ringing, I like the sound after you hit the snare drum, but the actual hit itself, that initial hit when you trigger it, it just sounds off. It sounds too digital, it sounds plasticky, it just sounds very weird. So I'll definitely have to figure something out with that one. Setting aside my first impressions of this drum plugin, what I'll do now is we'll go in Reaper, we'll adjust the volumes of the individual components, maybe change up the reverb compression, just try to make it sound as good as possible. Then we'll put it to the test with my drum set right behind me, and then I'll give you my final thoughts afterwards. So keep in mind, I'm not a music professional, right? But the old saying goes, your best instrument is your ear. So, we'll see how that turns out. Alright guys, so I just got done readjusting the sounds and all the different settings with this drum set. And the first thing that I wanted to do was lower the volume for everything except for the bass drum and the snare. Because immediately those were the two things that kept getting drowned in the mix the most. So I figured, let's try to readjust everything, but keep the volumes the same for these components. So essentially, I turned the volume down for the different toms. They were at 70%. I knocked them down to 50% because I still like to have the toms be prominent in a mix, depending on the type of music that I'm making. And obviously the cymbals had to get turned down too, more so than I expected. And the hi-hat, that's the first cymbal that I readjusted. I knocked that down to, I think, like 25% instead of 70. It needed to get way knocked down because whenever I have an open hat, so that's without my foot on the foot pedal, it just sounded way too loud. It was overpowering the snare. So I kept knocking it down until I found a sweet spot around 25% or so. So you can still hear it. It still sounds pretty good. It doesn't get buried in the mix, but it doesn't overpower anything, right? We're trying to improve the dynamic range to where, you know, you can still hear everything go up and down depending on the different component of the drums, but I just don't want the wrong things overpowering everything and really pushing that decibel limit, you know what I mean? Because whenever you're doing any kind of mixing, mastering, recording, you want your decibel to start at 0. So I didn't want anything to push past 0. And these cymbals and the toms, without the adjusted volume, just knocking the volume down, they would have pushed the decibels above. And when that happens, it results in clipping. And clipping is essentially just any kind of distortion where, you know, if it sounds loud, it compromises the sound quality. Just not good, right? So I had to do that with the hi-hat. And the ride cymbal was even trickier because even though they were the same volume, the ride cymbal was a lot louder than the hi-hat. And the hi-hat is already way too loud. So I had to knock that down additional pegs. I started by having them knocked down about 35% or something like that. But the ride cymbal was still significantly louder. So I knocked that down to like 30. While I knocked down 25% for the hi-hat, I kept that at 25. For the ride cymbal, I had to knock it down to 20. And I think I'm pretty content with that. Because you can still hear the ride. It's not like the bell, where, you know, the top of the rim towards the very center of the ride cymbal. It doesn't produce that sound. It's like you're just banging at the tip. That's the kind of sound that the ride cymbal has with this kit. So I want to make sure I knock that down an additional peg. So I got that down to 20%. And then the toms, like I said earlier, 50% for each, because I still want them to be nice and loud and full, but just not overpowering everything else, if you guys get my drift. And the crashes, I knocked them down to, I think, 35% as well. So I got that one taken care of as well. I'm saying as well too much, but you get what I'm saying. Anyway, so the next thing I wanted to do too was add reverb. So the reverb was set to 19%. So in other words, it sounds like you're playing in a relatively small room. You're not hearing that resonating ring once you stop playing stuff. And it sounds like you're recording in a smaller room, so there's not as much echo, right? It sounds a little louder immediately, but that sound doesn't stretch out as much. That's what happens when you play in larger rooms, like let's say just a very big studio room, or maybe you play at a church in a choir, which I have experience with, by the way. A little fun factoid for you. But essentially, I wanted to try to get this drum kit to sound like I was playing in a large room, like maybe at the choir at church, for example. So I actually brought that up to like 50%. That way it's got like that nice echoey ring to it. I don't like everything that way, but in this particular case, I figured it would benefit the kit, make it sound even more impressive as a result. And to go alongside that, I turned up the compression. So when you turn up the compression, this is especially notable for drums, it just makes them sound punchier, it adds an extra layer of oomph to it, you know what I mean? But of course, you do run the risk of potentially compromising the audio quality if the compression is just way too high and your volume levels are also too high. So again, keep that decibel limit no higher than 0 whenever you're adding compression. But when you add compression under that decibel limit, it does improve the sound quality as well. And like I said before, it just gives it a nice oomph, makes it just punchier, sounds more powerful. And, you know, I was going to go with 50%, but I felt like that was a little too much. And I was trying 30%. I didn't think it was quite enough. So I went right down the middle, 40%. So that's how I did it. And the master volume, I kept them at 70% because with everything being said and done, it's only just below that 0 decibel threshold. You want to keep it below 0, right? No clipping, no compromising sound quality, nothing like that. So that's basically how I did it. And here's the final product. You guys let me know how it sounds. Alright guys, so that's how the Cakewalk by BandLab plugin sounded like. Changing the different settings, adjusting the volumes, all that good stuff. And I think it's safe to say it wasn't quite the Cakewalk that I expected. There's never not an opportunity for a good pun. Well, okay, maybe they're not very good, but yeah, you get what I mean. As for my final thoughts, I think this drum plugin is pretty interesting. It's got some neat features, and as far as being able to readjust the volumes, change compression, reverb, the master, all that good stuff, it does a pretty good job with that. And I do think a lot of the individual components, like the toms and some of the cymbals, they sound pretty darn good. And with my readjusted settings, it definitely emulates like a drum kit that you'd find at a church. You know what I mean? So nice and echoey, and it might be a fairly cheap kit. For anybody that has experience with drums in the choir, let me know in the comment section down below if you know what I'm talking about. Essentially, all the way in that back corner, cheap drum set, but otherwise has some pretty good sounds. That's basically the impression that I get from Cakewalk by BandLab. Now, I don't love that snare, but, I could get used to it. And I think this kit, it could be interesting for some stuff. I know at the very least, this could be pretty decent for band practice, So, overall, I think I would recommend it. And fun fact too, this actually comes with its own digital audio workstation, otherwise known as DAW. And it comes with some other plugins and some different editing tools and whatnot. So if you guys want to pick up Cakewalk by BandLab, link in the description box down below. And that's going to be a wrap on today's video. If you enjoyed it, you found it helpful, found it useful, if you liked it, just give it a lick. If you want to show support for your boy, just subscribe to the channel and ring that tackle bell, that way you get notified the next time I upload. And don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section down below, that way your boy can keep making those vegan and algorithm gains. You can also follow your boy on Instagram and TikTok. I have to do some pretty interesting things over there as well. And if you want to show super support for your boy, just be sure to visit my link tree. I got resources to help you and your family and friends go vegan. I got resources for vegan activism. And I got my Cash App, PayPal, all that good stuff, so you can also help your boy keep making those vegan and financial gains. I love all yous. Appreciate your continued support of my channel. And I'll catch you next time. Take care.